Welcome into another Locked On NFL Insider edition. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens, joined by Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons today. Thank you for joining us, Aaron. We kind of saw this coming, obviously, the last couple seasons. It's been talked about, that Matt Ryan might be heading out of town, but now we actually know he's headed off to Indianapolis. Kind of what was your immediate gut reaction when you heard the news today?
Yeah, we've been knowing for a while that the end was coming. We've known since probably this weekend after the Falcons' failed pursuit of Deshaun Watson that the end was nigh and coming in a matter of days. And so it was just a question of where he was headed and what the Falcons would get back for him. And the Colts immediately popped up as a team that a lot of people speculated as him heading towards. So him being sent to Indianapolis was not a surprise, but the fairly paltry return that the Falcons got for Matt Ryan in a third round pick and the second of the two third round picks that the Colts had seemed a little disappointing. So that was kind of initially my reaction to see one of the team's pillars of the franchise for a decade plus to basically be, dumped for pennies on the dollar was a little disappointing in my eyes.
Certainly a bitter taste in the mouth. I mean, I don't have any skin in this game exactly, but you look at it on paper and you're like, okay, that's all they kind of got back for that. And then what they decided to do with Marcus Mariota in signing him as either the bridge or just the next guy, what's really the role they're going to expect from him? Is this kind of a rebuild guy?
Yeah, I think bridge is a perfect way of terming it. I think right now the plan is at some point in the very near future, potentially the 2022 draft, possibly in the 2023 draft, the Falcons will try to find their quarterback of the future, their franchise quarterback to succeed Matt Ryan long term. And Marcus Mariota is the guy that can start games for them this season until they find that player or until that player is ready to start. He's experienced in Arthur Smith's offense from their share days in Tennessee with the Titans. And so he's familiar with the scheme. He's certainly performed at a capable starting caliber level in previous times in Tennessee. So certainly a guy that can keep the Falcons competitive from an offensive standpoint. But unless Marcus Mariota is significantly better than where he was when he left off in Tennessee, he's probably not the long-term solution.
Is this really kind of the white flag in terms of we're going hard in this full rebuild at this point? I mean, not that they weren't necessarily trying to do that a little bit as they were going along, but to kind of see that they didn't even really fight for a big return. They've got some dead cap money as well from that deal, and then no big grand plan after that.
Yeah, this was a issue that was debated ad nauseum a year ago when the Falcons held the fourth overall selection with the new regime, head coach, new general manager. Did they rebuild or did they sort of reload around Matt Ryan and some of the pieces that they had, like Julio Jones, like Calvin Ridley, who are no longer with the team at this point in time? And they chose to kind of reload, it's seemingly, and passed on an opportunity to take a young, talented quarterback at the top of the 2022 draft, including, a hometown kid in Justin Fields, who ultimately went to the Chicago Bears. And it would seem that if you had drafted him and then traded Matt Ryan this offseason, hopefully would have gotten more than a third round pick on that return. You could at least say, okay, we're in a rebuild, but we have our quarterback secured, the most important position on the field, and we can start to put the pieces around them. That's what you're seeing with the Bears doing with Fields as we speak. And so that at least gives you a direction. But now, sort of a year later, to kind of start the rebuild, probably a year too late, where you now don't have that answer at quarterback and you haven't really made any major strides and you still have some of these key holes along the offensive line and in the defense. It doesn't feel like the Falcons taking this rebuild path at this time was the right direction to go. But we'll just sort of have to see if they can sort of steer themselves out of it in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, there's some uncertainty around the rest of the division, other than Tom Brady, of course, so that should help them out a little bit. At this stage in his career, obviously, we know Matt Ryan has put up those crazy numbers before. We know he struggled recently. What kind of player are they going to get?
Yeah, I think the Colts are going to get a really good player. I think he's certainly an upgrade over what they had a year ago in Carson Wentz. He's going to be much more secure with the football. He's not going to be as big a gambler as Wentz. There's some, pros and cons with that sort of take, but I think Matt Ryan's proven throughout his career that if you have weapons around him, players that he can distribute the ball to. He can be a highly effective quarterback. That's what he was throughout most of his time in Atlanta. The last couple of years when they haven't had nearly as strong a supporting cast around around him. You've seen some of the diminishment in his play and in the Falcons' play. So I think in Indianapolis, behind a much better offensive line with a strong running game, some weapons at the receiver position, and a defense that isn't necessarily going to constantly give up leads and force the team to play from behind, I think Matt Ryan can really be a high level player in Indianapolis. The only concern I think you have to have if you're the Colts is that you're pretty confident Matt Ryan's good enough to get you to the postseason, but you do wonder, given sort of the high level of quarterback play in that conference with the Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert types of players, is Matt Ryan going to be the guy that's going to lift you over the top against that level of competition once you get to January? So I think that's a legitimate concern, but certainly if the goal for the Colts is to be at least in the dance playing in January, I think Matt Ryan certainly is capable of getting them there.
Obviously, it stings a little right now just to kind of see how this all ended with the Falcons and Matt Ryan parting ways. But one thing, the dust settles, a couple years pass by. What do you think his lasting legacy will be with the Falcons?
Yeah, I think right now there's no doubt that Matt Ryan's legacy is one of stability, where he sort of came into Atlanta in 2008, shortly after the Michael Vick fiasco, where he was in prison for dogfighting, shortly after Bobby Petrino being a disastrous hire for the Falcons and quitting on the team midway through the season. And so they needed that sort of stability that Matt Ryan was able to provide for 14 years at the quarterback position. And the Falcons have been the team that has drafted the least number of quarterbacks in that period of time because of the amount of confidence and capabilities of Matt Ryan in that span, and uplifting that team to being a team that could be competitive year in and year out. The Falcons began in 1966, and for the first 42 years of their existence, they had never had back-to-back winning seasons, and Matt Ryan was able to accomplish that in his first 2 years in the NFL. His first pass in Atlanta was a touchdown. So it was all seemingly made to be with Matt Ryan and sort of getting this team to being a relevant team and a competitive team, and going to the NFC Championship in 2012, going to the Super Bowl, and should have won the Super Bowl in 2016,
Mhm.
and him having that MVP season. But when you look at the legacy of Matt Ryan, it's a golden age of Falcons football, sort of in a sea of, things that are not as golden. And you wonder if the Falcons cannot get back to that level with this current regime, that only makes the Matt Ryan era look even better. But certainly, I think a lot of people will sort of lament those good times, even if maybe the last couple of years have not been as promising as they were early in Matt Ryan's career.
Think a little distance will definitely help looking back at those fond memories. Aaron, thank you for your guidance and for your wisdom. We appreciate it. I'm Kanani. This has been Locked On NFL.